Are you ready to level up?
I'm Ethan.
And I'm Travis.
You're listening to the Level Up Business and Life podcast,
where we talk to the top business entrepreneurs to learn their level up secrets
and get their tips and tricks to level up your business and life. Level up your business and life today.
Honestly, I've been recording audio since for the past 10-15 minutes.
Oh, have you really?
I have.
Good.
So,
Alright.
let's do
Wait,
this.
is my jacket too crinkly?
No.
Does it show?
It looks awesome.
But I mean, can you hear it?
Can I hear it? Well, I mean, when you do that, yeah.
Alright, I'll try not to squiggle.
Is that what everyone dresses like down in Miami?
Extra?
Yeah, extra. That's one word to put it.
I'm actually like mild there.
Yeah, that looks it.
I mean,
good.
like they would have this, but it'd be like to here.
Yeah.
So you're listening to myself, Travis,
This is Ethan.
and Miss Shaylee Edwards.
Hey guys.
What she essentially does is works with CEOs and other business-minded folk to help them achieve their goals and rethink how they think in order to do so. Shaylee's been doing this now for how many years now, Shaylee?
I've been coaching the methodology for about 4.
Okay.
And increasing how much of my time it took until September. I'm full-time on this work now.
Nice. So, how did you get into this? I know that we've all taken our lumps, but what really made you pursue this in particular?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no
And it's really exciting.
Yeah.
So actually, I got started. I was telling the gentleman a little bit. I worked in professional consulting for a few years after grad school and had an extenuating life circumstance and decided that I was going to go all in. I've always wanted to help people. It's like, well, fuck it. Oh, can I say that?
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah, no, it's
Thanks
fine.
for asking.
It's too late.
Well,
I
since
asked
you're
too
asking,
late.
yeah.
Say fuck as much as you want. Yeah.
Okay. Well, fuck. I decided to go for the dream, which for me was to help 500 million people feel free. And at that point, I didn't really know what it meant. And I thought I'd start with the physical body. So I went into coaching in Miami, Florida. I worked with one of the most elite fitness facilities in the world and found that what a person needed to do to be healthy was really accessible. But there was still all this stuff in their way. And so I started to get really interested in why people change or why they don't change and what's really at the top of everything somebody does or doesn't do. And that's been a really interesting journey. And I've been fortunate to work with some really incredible people. And we've done some really amazing things where we're changing how they think about things, what their relationship is to them. And then that changes what they do every day, which changes their results and their whole life.
That's awesome. So it's really just results driven.
Yeah, actually, I'm a big self-development business book junkie. And I think it's Chip and Dan Heath who mentioned the bright spot methodology in one of their books, which basically means like you look at what's working and you go from there. So I take how people are successful perhaps in their professional lives or in their personal lives and use that same success methodology and transpose it to an area where they're having more trouble. So if they think about budgeting in their business exceptionally well, then we take that same skill set and move it over to how they're thinking about maybe their relationships.
Interesting. Let me ask you this. You mentioned that you were doing consulting, then you had some sort of catalyst, some sort of event in your life that made you decide to go this route and go for everything. It's a two-part question. First off, if you're comfortable with it, could you tell us a little bit about that experience and why it kind of guided you towards the path you are now? And the second part of the question is, why did you choose this type of business? Why did you choose about developing people, making them their best? Why did you choose that path from that experience? Could you go a little bit into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I grew up in a really challenging home environment. My dad had, mental illness that went undiagnosed, and so it created a really challenging home environment. And when I was 25, my sister, who had taken things a little bit differently, killed herself. And so I felt that if I was going to be left on Earth, basically, that I was going to have to make it cool enough for 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the environment we grew up in, I'd always been drawn to how to make myself feel better and what is suffering and what is happiness and why do they matter and what to do about it. And I saw a big function of what my sister was dealing with was hopelessness. And I thought that was something that could be solvable. And it really is how you look at things that changes how you respond to them. And so I thought that if I went, I guess, ham on it, I might be able to bring something to the world that would help people if they were feeling hopeless.
Yeah, that takes a lot of self-awareness.
And the right attitude, frankly.
Yes. So being self-aware in itself is a challenge for a lot of people. What are some things that you do with your clients to help them become more self-aware, to channel their emotions in a specific fashion to get a better outcome?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so awareness is a big part of the work that I do with people. I find that everything somebody does or doesn't do makes sense in the world that they operate in. So the first thing I need to do is help them recalibrate to the world as it is. There might be some patterns playing out that are old, that were survival techniques that worked when they were younger, but not necessarily right now. And so the simple thing is really just starting to take metrics of your daily life. What words are you using? What are you doing? What are you not doing? A really great one is just to take pictures of food every time you eat, because that's at least 3 or 4 times a day that you're pulling yourself into the present and asking yourself a question like, why am I doing this? What's going on? But that can expand anywhere. Just it's space between you and the action. You have an emotional response, you give it a little space, and you ask, why do I feel that, rather than, oh my God, I feel that.
So when we're at dinner and my girlfriend's taking pictures of for her Instagram of the food that we're going to be asking, I can't judge her too much because you're saying that's a good thing. She's doing the right thing.
Yeah, she's present.
Okay.
Ish.
So I won't cast judgment as much as
I've had Ethan's food, and I can tell you right now it's a present.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's just proud.
Yeah, I guess.
That's good feedback for you.
Yeah, all right. They're very interesting. Now, I wanted to back up really quick, go back to it, because it sounds like you had a very, very emotional, powerful why of why you're doing this and what you do for clients. I imagine it's a very powerful story to use when you talk with clients, new prospective clients. Going back to that, I don't know, it's a really tough situation in general. I've actually thought of that. I have a couple of sisters and brothers myself, and that's probably the worst scenario I've ever heard of in my life, or I can imagine. And but you already used your teachings, it seems, because you had, to use that as a jumping off point as opposed to a rock bottom point is just did you find that gave you extra motivation and propelled you farther forward? Just the fact that you used the right attitude, you had the right attitude, and you used that point in your life that was, I'm sure, a terrible point in your life, and used it as the starting point of your life. Like, what was your mentality? What was your drive to do that? How did you get the right attitude in that situation? How did you keep your head up?
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, for about 6 months, I don't think I really talked, except I think I had a lot of Ben & Jerry's. I know my way around the freezer section.
Sponsorship opportunity. Ben & Jerry's, if you're listening.
Thank you, Ben, for all you do. Actually, so that was about 7 years ago, and really, it gave me the I'm going to die anyhow kind of thing, so I might as well go out swinging. To me, at that point, the worst that could have happened did, and so I didn't really have anything to lose. It's not to say that actually was my bottom point. I think in following my path, it got dark several times. It's a hustle when you go and do things that other people can't see yet, and just stay in the path. So there were several times, and I think what really kept me going was just, again, I was here, I'm going to do the best I can, and just this insatiable need to bring whatever it is I can to the people who need it.
One of my philosophies has always been what you do in the dark will always come to the light.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, if you do more good while you're in the dark, while you're secluding yourself and reorganizing your mind, is that for the positive or is that for the negative? Because if you go one way or the other, it's going to show through regardless. I came across a story years ago about two brothers that their mother died being raised by their father. Father was trying to make ends meet, robbed a liquor store, and ended up shooting a woman in the process. Kids were taken to foster care and were separated in foster care. Throughout their teen years, both of their foster parents had passed. Many years later, a reporter got hold of this story to kind of check up on the boys, and she comes to find out that the one now man is very successful, runs his own business, has a family. The other brother, hard on his luck, drugs, alcohol, just hurtful behavior to himself. And when she interviewed both of these now men, she asked them the same thing. From the circumstances that were put in front of you, how did you get to where you are today? And both of them had the same answer. What other choice did I have?
Yeah.
So these are two brothers coming from same situations, literally the same situations. How do you put those two together?
Yeah. It seems like, I don't know if you found this with your clients or whatnot, but it seems like I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, frankly just successful people in general, who have that story of, not, I wouldn't say hit rock bottom, but bad stuff happened, and that's when they decided to, all right, I should probably switch something up and change something. Why do you think that happens? I mean, is that a trend that you see, or what are your thoughts on that?
Actually, I'm so glad you brought it back this way. I find that it is intense desire that's created from lack. And so a person who has like an okay life, they're not really desiring or imagining much beyond where they are because they don't really need to. It's comfortable enough. Yeah. But what's been really fascinating, so I've done a lot of internal work, and that's something that it's a whole nother conversation, but I found that the greatest obstacle for me in the past year was becoming okay with not being motivated by something that sucks.
Yeah.
Because it can be an addictive pattern, and if someone finds success and saying like, oh, I've got pain, so now I can do something, I have power, it's finding a new power source so that you can live outside of the quote-unquote trauma that might have started your engine.
Could you pause that for a second? I think you're going somewhere good, but I wanted to ask about that specifically. What do you mean? Could you give an example of what do you mean by like not being motivated by something that sucks?
Well, so similar to what I said about what got them into dreaming big to begin with, it's like, okay, I've got this contrast point where it's like, I don't want this. And so that points very strongly to what they do want. And then if it gets to a point where that's the only way that they move forward, then they're looking for things that are wrong. And so then it's constantly this never good enough thing. And it's needing to feel like there's a problem to solve to create, when that's not necessarily true. But because that's worked for them earlier, they really hold on to that.
So so you basically using negative motivation versus positive motivation. So like what isn't there as opposed to like what is there. Is that what you're talking about? I'm
saying more like coming from a place of what's possible rather than like I've got to get something. So I find that also in the traumatic situations, there might have been an environment. So I speak to my dad in this situation specifically, but there's a whole host of network effects that created the situation for my sister and I. And so he's one touch point, but there were many. And I find that if, I guess, wait, I lost myself. I forget where I was going.
Okay. Well, yeah. I was just it just seemed interesting. Positive versus negative, like what what kind of thinking people should have.
Oh, right. Okay. So a person can become identified with hard work, and so they derive their self-worth from that. And if your self-worth is derived from hard work, then you'll always need increasing amounts of hard work to feel better about yourself. And so I actually took a pause for the last maybe 18 months and looked to see what else I could align my worth with.
Is that a lot like similar to like internal versus external motivation or gratification, if you will? So like you're working to take care of yourself. What you're challenging yourself versus you're doing it to meet some sort of societal level or do something because somebody else thinks that it would be good. Like, is that what you're referring to?
I'm thinking more like that, and also like if I do this, then I'll get love. If I do this, I'll be good enough. If I do that, and some of that can be part of and this is where I got lost earlier, that can be part of the network effect that creates the trauma that spawns the success in the beginning. So just being very aware of, am I doing this because I think I need to get something, or am I doing this because it's an expression of joy?
Interesting.
Right.
Wow. Okay. That's some good stuff. So you seem to have a very, very powerful why, and I think that's powerful.
Yeah. So I know we've talked about energies in the past, and I'm definitely very much an energy person. People have auras. People have they expel certain feelings about that are shaped around their energies. I can usually tell when my roommate is pissed off. I can usually tell when people, it's having that little bit of EQ, that emotional intelligence behind it. But ultimately, all energies are one, because we're all one energy essentially as a humanity. He's
trying to throw me in the deep end.
Am I on it?
Oh,
man. Did I push a button?
I could say some crazy stuff right here.
Go for it. That's why we're here.
Well, I mean, honestly, the turning point for me in having success tangibly externally was whenever I came to terms with there's nothing outside of myself to fear. And so what Travis is talking to, or how I interpret it, is very well described by ancient Eastern religions, where we are one, we are God. Everything is the same. And so it's the misperception of separateness that causes suffering, where you think this thing is outside of me, so it hurt me. But if we go back to the why that you're pinning down, by accepting that as part of me, by holding that as a powerful, positive thing, then that's given me the wherewithal to move forward. And so it's letting everything sort of be like, okay, this is for me. This is happening for me. How can I use this? What meaning do I need to attach?
Yeah, and I bet you. Well, let me ask you this. Like, I bet it wasn't easy to have that kind of attitude in that situation. Like, what was the catalyst that made you suddenly decide to have that, to get that?
I honestly have always been a little crazy.
You got to be a little crazy these days.
Honestly,
Travis, I know it's a little crazy.
A little bit.
That's probably why we're friends.
Yeah. That's a very big reason as to why we're friends.
It's like, oh, I see you.
I go to explain things to Shaylee. She's like, no, I get it. I totally get it. I'm like, really? I'm like,
yeah. Yeah, I guess I've always been enticed by what, like, even as a kid, like I said, obsessed with suffering and happiness and what's possible. I mean, I've been reading about this stuff since I was, 10. So I think a lot of it is innate, and also, like I was talking about earlier, about positive reinforcement loops. I got some success by having that kind of attitude, and so I kept applying it.
So what's really interesting about Shaylee is how she gets her message out there. So we started following each other before we even talked, because we started really around the same time promoting ourselves on Instagram, and just, we started kind of feeding off of each other, and then I ran into you at the gym right before you moved here, early summer, and then, I told you everything that I was involved in, and I was like, yeah, come on, come along. The road is dark, but we'll get there. I promise you. So, yeah, and we've been really motivating each other to do more stuff on Instagram and interact with people and how we interact with people, and it's been a lot of fun. Shaylee got on the one day I was doing it live, and I started spelling things. She's like, "Can you spell it backwards?" I was like,
Okay, that's another really important thing. Like, in all the research that I've done and all the things that I've, like, quote unquote discovered, there's no point not to be having fun. So, like, no matter how hard you're hustling, no matter what you have on deck, like, if you can't have fun, like, right now, like, what are you doing?
It sucks, yeah. You'll eventually burn out.
yeah, absolutely.
So I try never to take myself too seriously. Like, you can't see me right now, but I'm wearing, like, a really obnoxious gold jacket.
We can see you. I got video footage.
But it's really just keeping, like, the lightness about it.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Yeah, and I'm going to go back one more time because I would think that's a really powerful thing. You mentioned something about being fearless because you had the worst case scenarios, happen in your mind. Do you think that, like, how do I put this correctly? You think it's not important, but do you think it's helpful for people that do go through that? Like, now they know how bad it gets. I feel like a lot of time people paint this false narrative in their heads thinking like, oh, it can't get any worse. But I bet you that it can most of the times. And once you hit that point, you're like, okay, it's really not as bad as I might have already thought. Like, I love, my favorite technique that I use is, like, when I'm thinking about something and I feel scared, A, that tells me that I should probably do it. B, if I'm about to do it and I still feel hesitation, then I ask myself the question. It's like, okay, worst case scenario, what could happen? I lose my business, or I'm on the streets, whatever. And I ask myself, like, all right, at that point, what would I do to pick it up? And I always can figure out a way. So I always think to myself, like, all right, why are you hesitating when the worst case scenario, you'll be fine no matter what? Yeah, you'll probably lose short-term value, but yeah, you'll always be able to pick yourself back up. Like, how do you, when you hit rock bottom, do you feel like there's a powerful motivator there? Or obviously you don't want to. Nobody wants to hit, rock bottom. But, like, would it be a helpful exercise to almost, like, put yourself in that situation and try to imagine worst case scenario and think, and maybe that will help reduce some fear. Maybe that will fix an attitude that you might have. Do you feel like, I don't know, you understand what I'm saying? Is that is that valuable in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the exercises I can do with clients is similar to what you're describing. I call it walk it out. And basically you take the fear, what you think might happen, and you keep asking, okay, then what, then what, then what? Mm-hmm. Where you ultimately arrive to the point where, like, I lived, like, ain't no thing.
Right. Hey, you're always alive. As long as you're alive, it's better than most people, man.
And
better than most people. You're still around.
Yeah.
As long as you're breathing, you still have a chance.
Yeah, and
you have that. You have the opportunity. You have the opportunity. So, I go into I talk about having the ability, and then having the drive, and how the ability, the fact that you have breath in your lungs. And then you have the drive, the willingness to push yourself. You put those two things together, and opportunity is just going to be bountiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting in that too, I find, I mentioned earlier about self-worth, but it's important to do sort of internal work to be like, okay, like, I can handle what comes my way, right, as far as positive things as well. So let's say you bring this great relationship into your life or this great business. There might be some subconscious fear that you'll screw it up because of whatever
I hear
happened.
about that self-samentage thing all the time.
Yeah.
You get a good thing, it's like,
oh, I know people that do that to themselves. Mm-hmm. And they mentally just hit themselves in the knees with a baseball bat.
It's amazing.
To cripple themselves, so that way they don't even, they're what they think is ahead is so the picture that they paint is so much worse than what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you face that head on, the output from that event is going to be so much better, because then you have the ability to combat it rather than kind of sit there and wait for your punishment, if that is the case, or the reward if that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
So people just psych themselves out, and it sucks.
Do you find more of that versus, people self-sabotaging on good things versus people that don't take advantage of bad things? Like, do you find a trend either way in your profession?
I guess I work with a lot of overachievers.
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of people who feel that they've got a bunch of cylinders firing, but there's maybe one that's lagging. And I guess I would describe self-sabotage more as procrastination.
Oh
where
my
it's,
God.
It's like...
That's bad for me. How do you fix that? Why don't
How do you fix that?
Yeah, tell me right now.
Well, here's a quick one. This works for real. So rather than have like the line item on your to-do list, if you just break it instead to 15 minutes of whatever you do towards that thing, and you put that down, like that's it.
15 minutes increments?
15 minutes. Just say you have like this like turn-in application for something, and that's been there for like 7 months.
Yeah.
So now all you have on your to-do list is a 15-minute block towards application, and so you'll do that, and then it's done.
Yeah, is that similar to the idea that you just do, if you get started with something, most of the time you'll end up getting done? I heard somewhere that a good technique is, it's like, just do write one line or something, and then once you get going,
Mm-hmm.
and then you end up finishing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I try just to love the process.
yeah.
Yeah.
As much as the process can be tedious, you have to learn to love the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in whatever facet that is, because you know what the end result is going to be. The journey. I was watching Joe Rogan's podcast. They just they finished up the Sober October.
Yeah.
And which Joe Rogan was just a beast. I mean, it was him and his three buddies, Ari Shaffir, Tom Segura, and Bert Kreischer, and they had this point system attached to this watch that had this app. And so to give you an idea of this point system, so an hour using 90% of your heart rate was like 75 points. Joe Rogan was putting up 900-point days.
That doesn't sound healthy.
That does not sound
Sorry,
healthy.
as a fitness
First off.
professional.
Second off,
Former fitness
they're like, how did you do that? He was like, well, I get to a point where I'm tired, and I go, well, can I take another step? Can I take 2 more steps?
Yeah.
How about 3?
Yeah.
Can I keep going? And at that point, it's all in your head. It's a lot easier said than done whenever you're on something like an elliptical in that case, or a treadmill where you just have repetitive motions. But same thing, same concept with what Ethan was talking about. Can you write one line?
Yeah.
How about another line?
Can
Can you write a paragraph?
Mm-hmm.
How about 2? Maybe 3?
But I think that like shows how powerful what you do for business owners are. It's like it's mental, the right mental and the right attitude is so important. Like if you have the wrong attitude, you won't take that extra step.
Right.
You won't write that extra line.
You wouldn't even take the first step
You won't
because
take the first
you're
step.
afraid of the 5th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So going back to what sorry I keep bringing it back there, but I think it's just you have an interesting story. So we'll pick up where Travis was talking, because you do have an interesting marketing strategy to reach your clients. Like, how do you tell your story, and how do you how do you tell your story and how do you reach your clients? What's the techniques that you use to help with their story?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I found is authenticity. And so I come through on my Instagram as real as I can, meaning I don't try to act like I'm perfect. I don't try to act like I have it all figured out. I say like, hey, this is my process. This is what I've got going. This works for me. This doesn't. And also just letting your personality through. Like, I'm quirky. Like, I think I'm funnier than I am. Like, stuff like that. And that resonates with the right type of client. Mm-hmm. And what I found is in the self-development space, there are so many voices, and all you really have to do is be your own.
That's interesting. So you don't have to worry about differentiating yourself because you're
already different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's a simplified. That's a good way to simplify.
I've been getting a lot of the similar feedback that Shaylee has, because I'm a nerd. If you go on my Instagram, it's comic book pictures of me in masks and paintings and like face paintings and all kinds of crazy stuff and weird shit that I come across that I think is really cool. I don't think, dude, if you think it's cool, more power to you. If not, it's kind of like Shaylee at one point, she's like, you've got a lot of tattoos, but you keep them covered up. And I'm like, well, because they're for me. And I kind of think of my Instagram that way, too.
And it's a little cold up here sometimes.
Yeah, it is. We are in the mountains, so.
Travis was walking around with his shirt off, people, and they'd be excited, but it'd be really cool.
Yeah, it'd be, something's attacking me. You got a ficus behind me.
A little ficus,
So.
Oh, man. Yeah.
But, I mean, it's, just be you and be the best version of you. I remember I was at a restaurant in Miami, coincidentally, a few years back, and I said, be your own best-selling story. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, I think that was like a Dr. Seuss quote but props to Doc. He's got me through some tough times.
The Doc.
The Doc. You got the boss, and then there's the Doc.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but we come across these little nuggets in our journey that you go, yeah, that triggered, some emotion, some oxytocin in your brain that, kind of gives you happiness that you're doing the right thing and you're pushing forward and you're, again, being the best version of you. Mm-hmm.
So why Instagram? Why did you choose that? Not something, because it doesn't, like, I guess all social media you can be yourself on. Instagram is more visual. Mm-hmm. And you guys are the marketing experts, not me. So correct me if I'm wrong, but why did you choose Instagram?
Well, I'd say Instagram shows me.
Okay.
No, I honestly, what I found to be also really helpful is listening to my own intuition. So I've read, like I said, a ton of business books, a ton of self-development. But
what's your favorite?
Business books?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
I'll ask that question in a second. Yeah, anyway, continue. Sorry.
But I just felt like that was what I needed to be doing, and I've had a couple mentors along the way that was like, yo, you need to be doing this. And in some respects, they were probably right, but for what I ended up building, which was a little bit unique, I've got an incredible tribe on Instagram, great interaction. I've met I've met a lot of the people in person or I've had calls with them. And it felt right to me to do, even though it didn't necessarily make sense.
That's awesome. Now, how do you connect with people on Instagram? So you yourself, I understand.
Hit me on the DM.
Yeah, okay.
Stalking.
Give me a DM. Okay, gotcha.
No, I mean it's a small town, and I think I've said this before. It might be a Gary Vee book. Talks about the thank you economy, but saying like, you cross people, you see their stuff, you like their stuff, you talk about their stuff, and then before you know it, you're friends.
Right.
That was what got me hooked. The thank you economy. Mm-hmm. Of Gary Vee. I've been following him since 2012, I believe.
For those who don't know, what's that?
So Gary Vaynerchuk, also nicknamed Gary Vee.
Right, the man.
So, the
myth, the legend.
The man,
He's
the
awesome.
the legend. Just came out with a pair of shoes.
You talk about somebody that's himself. That's what I like about him. He's like, he doesn't give a shit.
The thank you economy is really, I go, yeah, I get it. And he had a keynote that I was just like, I've been telling people this for years. And, he's forecasting all of the Instagram and Snapchat. And, he talks about attention and being real. And now he's like, you have to out-care. you have to outcare the next person. Showing them that you care is going to be the biggest piece of advertising for yourself, because it's not only just getting that client, it's retention as well, because now you are keeping that client.
You know, and that's been so huge for my business. Like, I have a girl that'll be hitting 3 years with me in January.
Nice.
And for a coaching business, you'd think oh, you do it for a few months and you're done. But I try my best to stay ahead of what she needs. And so I act a lot like a steering there. She's doing the work in the weeds. She's a high-level healthcare consultant. And I'm like, all right, now we're going to look towards this. Now we're going to look towards that. And it's also being respectful of everybody's process. It seems like from the outside, the people that are on are always on. But that's not true. There's a lot of ups and downs. And the recovery portion is super important. Entrepreneurs are like, go, 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 go. And then they like pass out. But giving yourself, the down portion to be a valid part of your journey is so incredibly powerful and game-changing.
Down portion, are you referring to like a time to recharge your batteries, if you will?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even just energetically. Sometimes you'll feel like I just don't have it. Like I don't care at all. And you tried all your regular buttons to press to get yourself motivated and nothing's happening. Rather than think that the system's broke, just be like, okay, the system's offline.
Right.
I'm going to give it a few weeks and then the world will stop ending and all will go on.
Did you unplug the computer?
Yeah. Get away.
Did you turn it off and turn it back on again?
That's such good advice.
Yeah, did you ever watch? There's a British show called The It Crowd. It's these IT nerds, and they just had a recorder going. Did you turn it off and turn it on again? Did you unplug it and plug it back in again? And then they also go, "Have a nice day," and the phone hangs up. But it's like this huge contraption that they have just in their office, so that way they just don't have to answer IT phone calls for this huge building. It's pretty funny.
But it's so true. I mean,
Yeah, unplugging is important these days, especially these days when
Yeah, I'm about to
try
unplug.
everything. Don't unplug yet.
I'm about to unplug.
Don't do it.
I'm plugging in. I'm plugging back in
Oh
different.
yeah, you're going down to Mexico.
I am.
Dude, that's gonna be tight.
Yeah, that's so. My roommate and I were going to be working on our own more comedic podcast. It's going to be some dark comedy. That's kind of the grounds that I like to play in. It's going to be called Ike's Basement. It's dark down there.
It's dark down there.
But some other things that you have to keep moving, and you have to create your own energy. You can't rely on people to create energy for you, and that's something that I believe in strongly, because if you don't create your own energy,
No one's gonna do it for you, man.
Right.
No one's
Right.
gonna do it for you. That's the thing people don't realize is and there's a bigger thing about entitlement with especially the younger generations these days. And you have to understand, and I'm talking like an old guy saying younger generations, but you get what
Dude, I'm a millennial.
Yeah, I am too, but oh god. But what I was getting at here is that I forget what I was getting at. No.
about
I said
millennials.
millennial brain.
Yeah, millennial
Well,
brain,
you know-
motivation. Yeah. Anyway.
So I found that actually it's not entitlement so much as they're like unconfident, and because things have been easy or not, there hasn't been struggle, or they haven't had to work through skills.
That's right.
So it's really just non-experience that
Yeah.
leads to hesitation. It's not necessarily that they're lazy; they just don't know what to do.
So I remember what I was getting at. That actually plays well off of that. Is that they don't realize now, because they're used to getting things, used to having a certain way of life or whatnot. They don't realize that it's always up to you to get stuff done, right? If at the end, when you hit rock bottom, you realize that suddenly you find out A, who you can rely on, and B, that the only person that you can always rely on no matter what happens is you, as long as you have breath in your lungs, So you gotta get done. But anyway, let me ask you, you mentioned earlier your favorite, you read a lot of books. What's your favorite business book? I love books. I know Travis likes books too. He likes podcasts too.
I mean, I guess the one that I think about the most, or what has helped me move things the most, would probably be the Lean Startup Classic, and just
Well, that's a great book.
That is a great book.
just kind of getting out there and being like, all right, not waiting till it's built and then bringing it to market, but like doing it in response to.
Then experiment, test, optimize.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just started Ryan Levesque. Ask Levesque. I'm really enjoying that.
Ask. Okay.
And then, I mean, God, I can't say enough about Tony Robbins. Like, yeah.
Have you ever been to one of his seminars?
I haven't.
Yeah, I haven't either. I've read a couple of his books.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I would love to just be, a fly in the wall just at one of his seminars. Just I remember watching the special on Netflix, and I was just like, that's
Tight.
I feel like I do similar things, but on the marketing side, where he's doing things on the personal development side, similar to your space, really. So there's a direct competitor for you.
I never compete.
We had that conversation. We never compete. And we kind of, there's enough room at the table for everybody.
It's true.
So everybody, and that's what makes it stronger. Uniting and becoming one. One voice. Stronger, a stronger force. So business isn't done the way it used to be done. You have, I think you told me you have 70% of your clients are on Instagram? If I recall, you said approximately.
Right now it's changed. I'd say about half referrals, half Instagram. But I mean, some of those referrals would have come from
Instagram.
Yeah.
Are your clients like in person mostly, online, or like?
It's all virtual.
It's all virtual. It seems like a nice trend. And how do you facilitate to that crowd? How do you facilitate to the virtual client base?
How do I connect with them?
How do you connect with them? How do you
interface?
Yeah, interface.
So I mentioned, I think before we got online, that I work with my clients in a thing called a habit book, which is a Google spreadsheet.
Okay.
So I take my consulting background, and all of the focus work we do is actually metric driven, and it's in a Google document that we work in collaboratively. So they enter their daily data, and I go in, I make comments, I read, I'm connected most days on that. And then similar to the caring comment, like I'm in it for results. For me right now it was experience and not making like $1 million, although they don't have to be separate, but at the time
Everyone's got to eat.
Yep.
It's really about results for me. So what can I help facilitate that's real and sticks? And so I'm in touch with them on text or email most days.
That's awesome.
So what does your feedback loop look like? So whenever you're interfaced with a client and they have a problem and you present a new way of thinking about that problem, how do they react, or what are some typical reactions that you've had?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's a model where someone is asking for input. I'm also very sensitive to that. I don't know what's best for them. They know what's best for them. So I more or less try to create an environment where we can ask questions like that and they can get answers that are meaningful. So I'll try to ask questions that, if you study neurolinguistic programming at all, where it talks about language being limiting of your experience, if I hear a sentence like, this always happens or that never happens, that's a really easy low-hanging fruit to be like, okay, but what about when this? And then as soon as light goes there and more options are available, then a new choice becomes more relevant.
So you really kind of identify keyword triggers whenever you're interacting with them to identify, maybe continuation of thought processes that may be hindering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something you can do on yourself all the time. You hear yourself say something and be like, okay, wait, is that really true?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's linear linguistics, or NLP. That's a very interesting subject. It's interesting you brought that up, because I had a question, because on one of the breakdowns that Travis sent me over, you had some interesting semantics there. You had expression instead of attitude on your spreadsheets. Mm-hmm. You don't really say, why is that? Why do you have you use expression instead of attitude, right? Or did he?
And can I see what you're looking at?
Yeah. That probably makes sense, huh?
Was it on the greater levels of happiness thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think-
I
yeah.
I sent him what you sent me.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have lower expression, higher expression.
Oh, okay. So I see what you're saying. So, basically, it's a grid that walks out these greater happiness levels I have, and primary question that helps you identify where you fall on a spectrum, and then the spectrum has a lower end and a higher end, and I look at it as an expression because I think at any point, just like an instrument, you can play high or low. And so what I'm cueing there is the choice of I can frame it like this or I can frame it like that.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, and NLP basically just teaches the importance of words, like what you say the wrong thing, or it could help lead to the wrong attitude. And yeah, I agree completely. It's surprising how you can put yourself into a self-fulfilling prophecy by just using the wrong expressions, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Could you give us an example of something that a client said that you helped tweak by just tweaking the way they're referring to things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a really easy one is someone comes in, and this is left over from personal training days, and they say, I'm fat. I'm like, no, you have fat.
Right.
And it's not who you are. And then changing the whole conversation, we're hardwired to not lose things. So if someone comes in and they say, I want to lose weight, and they make it all about that, it's going to be hell. And it's not going to stick because it's not how we're wired to work. And so instead I try to change the conversation to, well, what do you want instead? What do you think that's going to give you? By weighing less or having a different body type, what do you think that opens up for you? And then latching on to that feeling. So you
Hopefully another belt loop.
Oh, yeah. So you want to feel excited. You want to feel confident.
I love my belt. Yeah.
You want to, take your clothes off and walk around Johnstown when it's cold. Like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Ask Travis.
I prefer not.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's just,
Maybe it's warm when it's warm, but
yeah. So just framing things to what you get from doing it, not what you would lose.
That's very interesting. So what kind of research did you do to develop this strategy?
I mean, I've cross-discipline interests. Actually, whenever it all kind of came together, I was reading a book on quantum electrodynamics, some Alan Watts, biology of belief, a bunch of literature. I find that, like, Kurt Vonnegut is, like, the truest shit you can read. And I sort of came to this, like, well, what the hell is everything? And that was, and since then it's sort of evolved. I find that the science is helpful to a point where I'm not necessarily convincing someone of the way that things can be, but expressing to a logical mind something that they can hold on to. But really, a lot of it's intuition. Like, if you open yourself up to know what you should do, like, you're gonna know. Yeah. It's just trusting it when it doesn't look like something that you think it should.
very nice. Yeah, the thought processes that I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about noise and different people's opinions, and I said, just because they speak the loudest doesn't mean that they're right. And I also think that goes with the thoughts that you have in your own head, because you may think you're worthless and you're the biggest piece of shit in the world, but that's obviously not right. But that's your own demon. That's your own thing that you put on yourself. That's the voices that you have to fight on a daily basis. By a lot of mental illness runs rampant in my family as well, and my brother and I kind of went astray for a little bit, and he was just going through a lot of times, just like hard times like I was whenever I was his age, dealing with a lot of chemical imbalances. And one day he broke down and texted me out of nowhere. It was probably 2 years since we talked last. And he apologized. He says, there isn't anything that I haven't called you that I haven't called you that I've called myself 10 times worse. And I'm like, I've been it sucks that we've had that time apart, but on the same token, maybe gave him time to get his head together. And, ever since we started talking, we started really getting back at it and trying to help develop him mentally and personally and occupationally. And, I want to put the people around me in the best situations possible, if they'll let me. And if I can help, if I have the ability to, then and I'm also driven to, then I want to help them get the opportunity, just by connecting people. That's always been my thing is, have you met Shaylee? Have you met Ethan? And the old kind of How I Met Your Mother, Barney at the bar trying to get Ted a date.
Show.
Yeah.
You like that show?
I actually haven't seen it.
Oh man, it's a good show.
Yeah. So there's a lot of life lessons that I wish I had a big brother. Granted, I've met a lot of people that have helped guide me along the way. It's probably just because I get lost very easily, but. But I wish I had a big brother to, that would have kind of helped me out at a much younger age. Maybe I would be a lot further, but you know what? I am here where I'm at today because I'm meant to be where I'm at.
You need to have the right attitude of the situation, man.
Right. Yeah.
I'd argue that if you had help, you wouldn't be where you were.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right where you should be, right?
Yeah. And I think help is an interesting line to cross because sometimes you're doing more harm than good. Mm-hmm. So I find that instead of it's more like be the beacon of what's possible, and then let them come to you and be like, hey, like, what do I do? And let them build up the structure to support the success that would come with it.
Yeah. The other night I was talking to a friend about old friend down in Baltimore. I went to elementary school with, reconnected, and we started talking about childhood development. And she's like, I just hope that I can be the best mother possible, da-da-da-da. And she does, she's a psychologist and works with kids. And then I jumped right into coping mechanisms and how, it's hard to sit there and watch your kid fall on their face, but on the same token, they have to be able to pick themselves up. Granted, there's times where you need to intervene, and teaching kids coping mechanisms is a lot like throwing spaghetti at a wall. It'll always fall off, and it's usually messy. And usually there's some sort of stain at the end. So that's, but
Nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. But you have to be able to control and teach kids coping mechanisms at a young age, and how to, fail now, fail quick, so that way they can learn more and learn quicker.
Mm-hmm. And be comfortable with failing.
Exactly. And I think that's the entrepreneur mentality. That's something that Ethan and I talk about a lot, and we talk about with a lot of our other entrepreneur friends. How do you get there, and how do you fail quick, and being able to fail and being able to quickly pivot and know the market at a pretty high at a 3,000 foot view, and being able to understand if this then that, what's next.
Now, I think it's also important to have the right attitude around failing, because there's a bunch of books about it, and I don't really like use the word failing because it has a negative connotation, but it's all about learning. And when you fail, it teaches you, I would argue, better lessons than when you succeed, because if you fail, you know that you don't like that feeling. I don't know who does like that feeling. And then you learn from, okay, if you look at it the right way, the right attitude, and you're like, all right, it's not you fail. Because again, like, as long as you're breathing and have the right attitude, then you can still get up and learn from those mistakes, learn how you failed, and go from there. And so, like, I completely agree. I'm all about not worried. Like, you should not fear failing. And it's the idea, I think it's the semantics of the word, it's failure. People think that, I'm done once I fail, I'll have a bad rep. Yeah, it'll hurt you, probably, it might. But if you figure out why you failed, figure out what the reason was, figure out how to fix it, and then make sure it doesn't happen again, you'll be that much stronger than you were, so that much better position. So I look at it more as learning opportunities. And like, I don't like calling it failing because it's like, all right, it's just a quicker way to learn.
Mm-hmm.
It cuts the learning curve. It's a painful way to learn,
Yeah.
oftentimes, but it teaches you awesome lessons. And I'll tell you, like, all the books that you can read, all the successful individuals you can talk to, I bet you not a single one of them didn't fail at some point, unless you're just really, really lucky. That's just luck. But I would be surprised.
Hershey went bankrupt 3 times.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's tons of stories out there. But they picked themselves up, and they got up and were like, all right, that sucked, but now what can we do? How do we fix it? What can we learn from this situation? And had the right attitude when they came about things.
Resilience.
That's important. Resilience.
Being resilient.
Yeah, you got to be able to take a punch as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. And we've been talking a lot about like tangible things, but I also think a lot about states of being. And if in a belief repatterning, and what you're saying is realigning sort of the meaning behind failing and your relationship to it, what you can do is look for examples, like you're saying, in your environment where it's like, okay, well, this person did that. One of the hurdles I see is, okay, how might this be perceived by my peers? What might other people say?
Yeah.
And what's helpful there, I think, is realizing or looking for examples of people who have failed, and then they walk into the place and they're like, fuck all y'all, like, I'm going to do it anyhow. And it's really like, okay, how do you show up? What is your state of being after the fact? Like, if you think you're cool and you think you're going to keep going, like, everyone else is cool with it too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. You'd be surprised how little people would care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
100%.
lot. It's up here, man. It's
Yeah.
up here. Let me ask you about the beginning of your hustle. So, like, when you got started, what is two or three things that you wish that you knew that you do now back when you got started?
Oh, saving.
Saving?
Yeah. Because for me, I always looked at it like I was buying my time. So it was like, do I want to work for more money, or do I want to spend this time perfecting my craft? Because I could trade time for money at a high rate if I wanted, but I didn't feel like that was the greatest return of investment over time in the long run. So I bought my time. And I think if I would have saved money while I was doing that, it would have made the process a lot more comfortable. In the beginning, you're like fingers crossed, hope this works. Right. And that's like fun for a little, but eventually you're like, oh, like I wish I would have done that. Yeah.
How did the conversation with your family go over whenever you told them you were burning the boat, jumping ship, and swimming ashore?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't tell my grandparents, which would have been the biggest, oh, no, you shouldn't, until the day I quit. I was like, oh, by the way, like, I quit today.
What'd they say?
Like, they were just shocked.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't do that. I should have done, or what the heck. I made a really abrupt choice from consulting to this. I could have leveraged it a little bit more smoothly. But the whole time, my mom would call and be like, Shaylee, like, don't you think you should get a real job? Like, all the time. Everyone
does. Well, that's the interesting thing. Like, unless you're in the hustle and you've ever done the hustle, like,
do the hustle.
You never know. You honestly never know.
Shaylee's got the jacket for that song. So.
Yeah, that's right. The swish. You got the swish down.
Yeah, but it's true. Not that it's the people that are closest to you that care the most that are going to give you the don't do it advice, because they're concerned about your physical safety.
Yeah.
And
there's validity to that.
Yeah, and I think the best way I found to approach that is to really thank them, like, wow, you really care how I feel and what I'm doing. Let me show you like what this means to me and what I think is possible. I really appreciate your support.
Nice. That's a great way to go about it. Thanks, Mom. I know I should get a job, but I appreciate your support. You're great.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, you're like, you're doing what? I originally told people I was going in and just doing like 360 camera stuff, which I was just trying, trying to find new technologies and ultimately, find cool cutting edge stuff to be able to build for companies and get this area moving in a different direction. And then I was like, what? I'm like, I have, get back into doing graphics, get back into my marketing and social media, and start digging, because there's more. There is so much more. And so it was like a 6-month period. Once I kind of burned the boat, that I was just hustling, and I was just getting in front of anybody and everybody, and just gotta, luckily I still had some old connections back into the business world with the Johnstown Chamber, Cambria County Chamber, and that was a huge leg up in my business. So what was acquiring your first client like?
Well, similar, I guess. When I left Equinox, I took some with me.
Okay.
And then I got a referral, and then I was using the habit book with some of the clients. And then when one of them moved to New York, I was like, hey, let's still work together over the phone. And then that's really what started
That's
it.
where it took off, huh? Would that be your level up moment? Would that be where your business finally really started to get traction?
I guess, actually, I think I mentioned I took about a year and a half where I just kind of dug into what everything was. So it wasn't really until this past May where I was like, you know what, I'm ready to do this. Let's be grown up. Let's.
Nice. How'd you balance that research with scaling the business at the same time? Because you said you spent a lot of time researching and everything, but you had to be doing the business at the same time and running a hot side hustle on top of that. how'd you manage all that stuff?
Well,
Besides
I guess
paying
I wasn't trying to scale at that point.
No.
I guess for me, what I bring is from here. So that was.
She's putting at her head, by the way.
Yeah.
So I had to put in the work. I can't take somebody where I haven't been. So for me, it was really just swallowing my pride and being like, all right, I'm going to live simply. I'm going to focus on this stuff. When people ask what I'm doing, maybe I'll tell them, but
Right.
this is just the way that it is.
Okay, so you were almost positioning yourself to really start running then.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Build that well before it rains.
That's right.
I mean, there are ups and downs to every path. So it's just whatever one what feels the best for you.
Well, that's awesome. What would you give? What's a piece of advice or something for somebody who might be in the position you were, that they might want to pursue something, might want to get started? What's something that you would tell them to keep in mind, and what strategy would you advise them to go after if they wanted to go and take the jump that you did?
I'd say don't make it a thing. Just start with whatever. If you think you want to help people, find one person that you can help and help them. And then, like Travis was saying, coming out into the marketplace with one thing and then letting it turn to something else, you really don't know necessarily what you bring. You bring something, and you might think it's something, but it might actually be something else. So.
Would you say it's important that you need to believe in your something?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and all the things you're saying, attitude, when you fall off, what is it going to mean to you? What are you going to do about it?
Gotta love the grind, man.
That's right.
That's what I tell everybody that's getting
process.
into it. You gotta love the grind.
Love the
grind
process. Love
Got
the
it.
process. The grind's great, get in front of people, but there's the shit that people don't see in the back end, and you have to be able to love that as much as you love the grind.
Yeah.
So those are two pieces of it.
I tell everybody, everybody loves the vision. Everybody loves the idea of, I'm going to build a company and it's going to be tight. And I'm going to be living off, I'm going to be doing this, that, the other. But what people that haven't done it don't realize and aren't doing it and never experienced it, they don't realize what it takes to get to that vision. Vision's awesome, but it's what you need to fall in love with, getting the vision.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you get the vision.
I think I forget where I heard this story initially, but there's a woman playing piano and she does it beautifully, and everyone's like, oh my God. And afterwards someone comes up and they're like, oh, I wish I could play like you. And she's like, no, if you did, you'd practice like I did.
Yeah.
And I find a lot people are always, oh, your lifestyle's I mean, what is today? Friday? It's 11 o'clock, and we're sitting here together like we're not in an office working for someone. So the flexibility that it affords, there's a lot of trade-offs along the way. You don't just, like, there's a lot of things that you have to work through being okay with to function in chaos and where the path isn't already set.
Right.
And that's a lot
It's
that people don't
intimidating a lot
realize.
of times. You need the right attitude, and it's not easy.
Yeah. But it's fun.
Yeah, it is.
I
It's
mean-
the best.
Was that Big Daddy Kane?
I
Pimpin'
love
ain't
it.
easy, but it sure is fun.
It is fun as hell. It's the best. That's what I tell people. Like, it's so much fun. I love it, but you'll probably never work harder than you do when you work for yourself.
Yeah,
So, but it's awesome.
Yeah.
being passionate.
Yeah. So Shaylee, anything else that you think we should know that, or our listeners, or like anything you wanna, any news or
So,
anything
like,
that you wanna?
Who's your ideal client? Like, who are the types of people you can help?
Okay, well, thanks. Well, first, the thing I would recommend is, I know this is cliche, but meditation. So when you feel like, oh, I need to work harder, I would say press pause, put yourself in a room that's dark for 2 hours,
Yeah.
and don't talk to anybody, don't look at anything, just be.
Yeah.
And that'll give you a lot more clarity than just running your head against the
Is
wall.
there a specific type of meditation?
I mean, I just lay on the floor.
Yeah.
My grandparents are like, what the hell is
Yeah.
she doing? But I
There's
mean,
a lot of types, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that can be counted as meditation.
I mean, it really what speaks to you, and it could be just a walk in the park. It could be doing something where your hands and your body and your mind are in the same place.
Right.
But I can't say enough about when I think of a Chinese finger trap. Like,
Yeah.
you got to relax into it.
Right. Well, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Thanks.
Yeah, I hear all the time. Like, there's a lot of famous people that will live and die by meditation. Like
Yeah.
Ray Dalio is one who swears by transcendental
Yeah.
meditation,
Yeah.
and that's a type. But there's a lot of people that are into it. So
hmm
yeah. So
Yeah. And then as far as ideal client type, I have a pretty wide breadth, but where I found success is a lot for people I mentioned before who have had success in one area and are looking to transpose it to another. So let's say that, I mean, I do really crazy things like help people find mates and
You're a matchmaker too.
well, it's all a point of attraction. I just help people get clear on who they are and what they want, and
Yeah. That's awesome.
I mean, it's really fun
So
work.
you're a one-stop shop then.
Well, it's been really, it's just mind. It's all
Yeah.
like, what are you focused on? And if you're focused on the lack of something, you'll continuously experience that. So I help people shift from a lack to an abundant mindset. And
Abundance.
yeah, it's all good. It's all gravy, baby.
It's
Do
all
you
great.
have a specific type of person that you like to work with? Is there like if I meet this criteria, then it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I should talk with you.
I'd say generally somebody, my psychographic for a while had been the 28 to 35-year-old woman who was single and successful at work, generally high on the thinking side, also might be interested in starting a physical fitness routine. But recently I found that I've had a lot of success with a 45-plus business owner who might have put their head in the ground and let everything fall apart except their business.
Right.
And so I help them get the other pieces online.
The work-life balance is tough to balance. That's a tough one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until you know the secrets,
Oh, there you
Oh.
go.
which you can get for.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mrs. Mi-
Call her up, huh?
Miss Miyagi.
Might as well make you plug right now then.
Wax on, wax off, young grasshopper.
Live the life of your dreams.
Well, where can they reach you?
I'm on habitbook.com,
Okay.
or Instagram would be at Shaylee _Edwards.
Yeah, it's Shaylee _Edwards.
2_.
2_.
Yeah, I know. I've been hollering at those people. When I'm a bigger deal,
You can change it.
I'll get all
you
of
can
them.
change it now.
somebody has it. There's a Shaylee Edwards with 1_ and no,
Fake.
and no underscore somewhere, just squatting on these accounts.
So
If you're
big.
listening and that's you, like,
So big.
we'll trade coaching for handle.
We'll trade coaching for handle. So it's
Have
Shaylee
your own identity.
with 2_ Edwards.
Yeah.
And
So-
that's her on Instagram.
Yeah.
So you heard it here. If you need any help and you want to talk with somebody, talk to Shaylee. She'll help you get your mind right.
That's right.
Thanks. Yeah, if you feel like there's something that you could do more, or if you're looking for a sense of purpose, or just to be able to enjoy all that you already have, like, I'm your girl. Let's
go.
chat.
Cool. Well, Shaylee, this has been a blast.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Thanks for talking.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. This was really fun.
Peeling back that onion, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fortunately, no one cried, so that's always good.
Well, yeah, I might go back. Who knows?
Ethan's over there holding himself in the corner, so
Yeah, you got a
Yeah.
powerful why, and you're in it for the right things. I think that's really important.
absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you, though. Thanks for coming through.
Thanks for having me,
Yep.
guys. It was really
Yeah,
fun.
I'm Travis. You can find me at travisscott.official.
I'm Ethan, and you can find me at a14works.com, Centennial Financial Group. You can find me a couple ways, but check us out on Facebook. Which,
On Instagram, we're pushing that hard right now. We are levelup.buzz. We have our shirts available at bit.ly/levelupbuzz. And you can access all of our podcasts online at http://levelup.buzz. And till next time, always level up. Take care.